Hey, and welcome back. So we've covered several topics already, and I just kind of want to recap the market research in general, kind of focusing on Figma. So I mentioned that it's not required or completely necessary to document this in your portfolio, but if you feel like there's important information or key information, or you just want to throw it in there for good measure, this is how I did it. So I started with the general SaaS industry, right? Because Figma is an online SaaS-based product, software as a service, and there's looking to be growth, right? So in the initial research I did, it looked like there was going to be double-digit year-over-year growth, but slowing down. However, this has changed. So I need to come in here and update this, right? Because of COVID, this research initially was pre-COVID. So post-COVID, there's set to be even more growth. And we talked about it before because there's been this massive behavioral change where so many different people are working from home, especially in this space, right? Designers in the technology fields or in the software industries, we're all working from home. As I speak, I'm sitting at home because I work from home. And so having these client-based desktop software that don't lend themselves well to collaboration, they aren't going to do as well. It is kind of what the hypothesis is, right? Things like Google products or now even the Microsoft online products and things like Figma for the design market, they've propped themselves up to do very well, right? I'm recording this over Zoom, right? And so Zoom has done amazing things in terms of their growth, and they've surfaced probably problems that they didn't even know were problems because now they serve a much bigger market. Okay, so when major market shifts happen because of environmental, legal, social issues, it can really change your priorities and your roadmaps. And so those kind of things could be very interesting to document as you go through this. So there still tends to be double-digit year-over-year growth with no slowdown in sight uh, due to COVID, creating long-lasting behavioral changes. Cool. So the next part is kind of going from the high-level SaaS industry, we have the more specific online design software market. So I couldn't really find anything on this when I was looking and preparing. Statista has a lot of great data, but nothing specific to this, right? And so I went a little bit outside of the box, okay? So I did a simple search on LinkedIn. If you're not on LinkedIn, it's a professional network where you can update all of your experience. And I think we went over this in a previous video for actually signing up as like putting an internship for Path to Product on your LinkedIn. If you haven't done that, good reminder, go do that so you can put your portfolio in there to show it off as well. A lot of jobs get posted on LinkedIn. A lot of hiring managers look there. So I went there to see on LinkedIn how many UX designers or product designers there were. And as you can tell, there's about 2.5 million. Okay, so I'm not saying there's only 2.5 million in the world, but it's a good number to go with and gives you an idea of how many designers are out there who would potentially use the product of Figma, right? So as I go through this, again, I don't have the data to know how many Figma users there are. I've looked, I can't find it. I did join a Slack community for Figma to try to see how many people were on the Figma Slack community, and there's a few thousand, right? And so again, I don't know if this represents the total available market of designers who could potentially use and purchase Figma, or if 3,000 or if 3,000 is their total user base right now. I'm sure this number we're seeing here on the slide might be low, and that the number on the Slack community is low and not representative of their total user base. But it does give me a reference point, which helps as I ask questions throughout this project and as I try to make decisions throughout this project. Okay. So we can say that 2.5 million could be a good number to go off of if we're trying to do some math later on as we prioritize things. So the next one's market voice. Okay, so Figma has a huge following with diehard users at some of the world's best known brands. Okay, how do I know this? Well, on their website, they show different brands that use their product that are known customers. They're well-known brands. I think Google's one of them. I think I have it up here somewhere, if I'm not mistaken. Okay, customers, boom. So Zoom, Uber, Gusto, GitHub, right? Coinbase, a lot of Microsoft, Stitch Fix, so a lot of brands that you would know, or at least some of them you should know. Okay. So there's a lot of big companies that know them, and big companies employ a lot of people. And when you employ a lot of people that are part of big networks, network effects take place. The word spreads, especially if they've used other competitive products. And then people want to try it out, especially since it's a free product up front. There's a low barrier to entry. So someone might be using a competitor like we have down here, Adobe, Sketch, InVision, and see Figma and like, wow, this is much better, or no, I prefer the product that we have, right? But Figma makes it very easy for someone to make that determination up front. Okay, so they do have a huge following. If you look on LinkedIn, they have a really good follower base as compared to some of their competitors. If you look on, I don't know if these other companies have Slack communities or Facebook pages, but they do have a really diehard following. Like I've been to product conferences and you see a lot of people walking around with Figma shirts on. So, so yeah, the customers they do have are very loyal diehards, which is good. It's very good for a brand. And then competitive landscape, again, Adobe XD is kind of that older incumbent. One of the ways you can tell who the real competitors are is, and I'll show this too in the user research section, but for market research, you can go to Facebook groups or LinkedIn groups where there's a lot of like-minded people in these groups, and there's UX design groups. There's tons of them with tens of thousands of people in each one of them. Okay, so you can say, you can put out a survey on these groups if you're not part of them already, and say, what's your favorite design tool, and then put out a list of different suggestions. And typically Adobe XD is one of the top ones, especially internationally, right? In the Asian markets, India in particular, a lot of Indian designers I see love Adobe XD. There's a lot in the US that still use it, but it's a very popular tool that's still used by a lot of people. But Figma is definitely growing in popularity. And there's another tool I didn't get to show in the previous video that I wanted to bring up as you're doing general market research and competitive analysis. So it's not all telling or all indicative, but Google Trends, right? Looking at search terms. So I put in a search term for Figma, and you can kind of see where the popularity is brewing, right? By region, which is really interesting. And you can see like related searches, which is really cool. But you can see over time, going back to 2017, it's done nothing but rise, okay? So you could say that Figma is growing in popularity, or you could say that the design ecosystem or online design is growing. But to do that, you really have to look at other competitors. So if you look at other newer design companies like InVision to designers that have been in design for a while, this was kind of the cutting edge thing from what I hear. I haven't been a professional designer, but you could see that the trend over time is decreasing, right? So that's something. And then if we look at Sketch, we see that's kind of holding steady. There's some spikes here and there, but it's pretty steady, right? And then if we look at something like, if I can spell Adobe XD, that's also increasing. So if you want to make a broad general assumption about this, especially since some of the markets are the same, some of the markets are different, which is really interesting from like a marketing standpoint. But from a product standpoint, this gives you a good understanding that the trending products are Figma and Adobe XD, generally speaking. And so one natural question I would have is, what is it about Adobe XD that people are gravitating towards that Figma doesn't have yet? What are their competitive advantages over my product? And so with that, I'll leave you to kind of think on those things. If you do want to document those things, I think some of it's really insightful, especially if for nothing else, as you go through the project, to kind of ask different questions and you might not have asked if you didn't do this market research. And so with that, we'll wrap up market research. And before we go, our last video on market research, we're going to hear from some professionals in the field and hear what they have to say.